So I'm very happy to see almost all seats filled. We calibrated this auditorium so we will fit in exactly, because it's very nice to have a full audience. Welcome to this first seminar in a new series that the Institute for Future Studies today is launching, and it's meant to be a series of seminars dedicated to, let's put it, larger future issues. We are a bit used to having these questions sometimes discussed, especially at the Institute, on a very scientific level. Not to say that this is not going to be scientific, but perhaps a bit narrow to the public audience. So today we are a little bit, anyway, trying to put these issues in the public domain. And these are big issues, to put it mildly, today. The future of work. What can one say of that? And coming seminars will be dedicated to the future of intellectuals. I don't wonder if there will be an audience for that, if there are any intellectuals around anymore. And another one will be future of democracy and future of inequality. So you see, these are large issues that we will tackle by inviting a prominent scientist on these respective fields. And I'm very glad to say that we have managed to attract Richard B. Freeman, whom I actually have met a couple of times, once here, once in Boston, where you direct still the National Bureau of Economic Research, which is an independent institution, has done immense work. You are world famous as a labor economist, I would say one of the leading, and you have been dealing with labor and labor organization from all aspects as I remember, and always interesting and very often funny, and always with a hat. And please, the stage is yours, Richard.
Well, I'm going to be talking about the strange, I called it paradox, where people are increasingly dependent on other people for their working together to produce outcomes, and the rewards from production have gone increasingly to a small number of people, which is a bit strange. And I will be using this PowerPoint to show you things, and occasionally I will give you some statistical tables that are just meant to show that this is all based upon pretty substantive evidence, so it's not on a general talk. I'm going to focus the first part on science and engineering work, which is knowledge work at its highest level, and where we happen to have good data on productivity, because people's names appear on the papers that they help produce, and we have data on pay. In the rest of the economy, it is more difficult to get individual productivity. We have some measures of team productivity and pay. And I want to focus, after I do these two sort of examples, is talk about in general, what kind of level of inequality do we need in the modern economy for efficient production? There's a little bit of a conclusion. Well, science and engineering just makes a striking example. Once about a time, there was individual scientists, and most of them, as you can see from the pictures here, were he's. And they wrote a paper in their own name or a book, and they might acknowledge some other people, but people, if you think about it, it's their work. That's the it's the Baylor University medical sciences group working in a particular institute, and we'll see. Nowadays, it's very strange for a scientist to write a scientific paper in their own name with collaborations. This is just shows you some data for the world and then for the US about the rise in co-authorships over the last 20 years. It's just zooming up. And what you'll notice as well is that international collaborations are also increasing. So not only are people working together more and more, they more and more work across country lines. So every production is occurring, everyone in the world, not everyone in the world, in this case, scientists throughout the world are working together. Actually, in the industry area, we see something similar because we have these global chains of production. And you cannot produce a particular consumer item today without there being many people in many different countries who are responsible for some parts of it, from the raw materials to the production in a factory to the assembly wherever it's assembled. Just it's and the more technical the piece of equipment, the consumer item or the producer item is, the more countries are involved. This is an example of collaboration. This is a paper in Science published this year, which you look at the names, and my goodness. I said, well, there's a Korean name, there are a bunch of Chinese names, there's a Russian-sounding name, there's a Scottish-sounding name, there's a Portuguese name, etc. This paper doesn't have any Scandinavian-sounding names, but you'll find the exact same thing in other articles. And then I looked at the name. You look at the names here. Many of them are at the Harvard Medical School. There's somebody in Arizona. There's somebody in Brazil. There's somebody in Shanghai, and then there's some private sector firm somewhere in Massachusetts. It's an example of what's going on in science today. Is there a payoff to multi-authored papers? Is it better for us to work collaboratively? These are regression coefficients, and I'll give you 3 tables of this, but we'll go very quickly. The key point is, however you look at the data over whatever time period, what one finds is that the measures of the quality of the paper, which usually the ones I'm using are how many times it was cited in the future, so it's called forward cites. As the number of authors goes up, the number of citations goes up. So now we ask, what do collaborators do? We asked we did an internet survey, and we asked the principal author, the corresponding author, it's the person who sort of is responsible, takes most responsibility for the paper. We said, what did your co-authors do? And what you notice is it's unique knowledge, expertise, and capabilities, which are the blue lines. This is whether they were co-located in the US, meaning US in the same city, whether they were the US and some non-co-located, meaning across institutions, or whether they were international, meaning in the US and overseas. And you just see that's the dominant thing. There's some things with funding, with data, but the big thing was, we all were bringing different information to bear, different expertise. This comes from the corresponding author, who will often be is almost always the most senior person on the paper. Now we ask the question about who gets the money from all this output. This is one of the disgraces of American science, and I don't know how it looks here in Sweden. This is percentage. NIH is the National Institute of Health, which is the biggest single funder of research in the world. Of course, we don't really know what the National Security Agency and some places like that spent. I'm still sure NIH is the biggest in the world. But biomedical, that's what we huge amounts to learn about diseases and so on. So this is their main award. And what you notice is at one point in the 80s and 90s, the people aged 36 and younger were getting a large fraction of the awards. And people 66 and older were getting very little. Now, people over 66 get 2 to 3 times as many awards as people younger. and the NIH is aware of this, but the way the process operates, you had a big lab, and you have all these people working under you, the money goes to you, and so a young person often has to work in the lab of a senior person, as opposed to starting their own labs. This is just gives you some idea of how the inequality of pay in the United States has occurred inside different fields by the position of the people, even as everybody is doing more and more work together. So what you see, if you take engineering assistant professor, you see is Gini coefficient. So the bigger it is, the more inequality there is. Between 1973 and 2006, the inequality more than doubles. And you go along here, and it's all across the boards. That's about the increase of inequality in the U.S. in general. And so people working more together, and the inequality is growing. And this does not account for the difference of pay between the full and the associate and the assistant professor. So it's just looking within the group. So it's even bigger, the rise of inequality. This is tabulated by Paula Stefan, who has a wonderful book, How Economics Shapes Science, from Harvard University. Now I want to jump from the sciences to the rest of the economy, where things are less clear because we don't have the same measures, but I see the same patterns. And I think it's fair to say that the rest of the economy looks similar. I just started here which for a quote from a paper by some MIT professors that just says, the primary approach to organizing has shifted from individual work in hierarchical structures to more team-based work, also in hierarchical structures, but more team-based. And they go on to discuss that. I did a survey with my colleague Joel Rogers from Wisconsin, and we found that 32% of American workers said they were working in these team-related aspects. And to us, it was very surprising. 35% of people who were not managers said that they supervised somebody else. But you can understand this. You're doing some work, and you have someone who specializes. The new person comes in. That's the person to supervise and help the new person get going. The senior professor in academics doesn't do that, and I assume the managers don't do that either. That's what's going on here. And then there's some discussion of the German, and Ake Sandberg has had some work on the work in management. He'll speak for himself later. So I think there is a lot of this teamwork. I'm not sure whether it's grown, but it's big. Well, the MIT people said it's grown, but they didn't have good surveys, so I was a little uneasy. What we have looked at as well is how people are paid in the economy, and this is group incentive pay. This is in the U.S., and it's very large. Profit sharing grew from 2002 to 2006, and then, generally speaking, people are paid these incentives, group incentives, when they're part of these employee involvement committees, which are also teamwork kinds of stuff. So I think it is again, the evidence is this quite a bit of this group work being done and people being paid accordingly. Again, we have this puzzle. More teamwork. I'm now reading all that evidence as saying it looks as if, or lots of teamwork, but we have higher inequality. And what you notice is this is every place. The share of income going to capital, the OECD now is reporting, across countries measured in a somewhat similar way, best they can do, has gone up. So it's gone up in the US, I know. And the top earners' share of earnings, labor earnings gone up. And Sweden, it's gone up, inequalities. There's some debate over how the capital shares moved in Sweden versus labor's share in government, which I don't know enough to comment on. But the Germany, it clearly has occurred in most of the EU countries. And then where's the income going to? The occupiers picked on the upper 1%, and that turns out was very, they didn't look at the numbers carefully enough, because over the period that they were talking about, which was through 2007 into the crisis, it was the 0.1% that made the greatest gain in earnings. Here I said they increased from 2.7% of U.S. national income to 12.3%. That's the 0.1%. It's just astounding. It's extraordinary because you could say, if we were back in the American context, you would say, if we only had the inequality we had when Ronald Reagan was president, because it was so much lower. It's like mind-boggling. So I said here, this is for the U.S., the new normal. Labor's share goes down, and the Gini coefficient of inequality just keeps zooming up. It hasn't stopped. And you imagine a world like some feudal Europe where there's the lord, and he's got a whole bunch of serfs, and there's other lords over there, and nowadays there's the billionaire, then he's got a few peanut guys who just make a few million, and then there's hundreds of thousands of people are working. Remarkable. I just want to point out that a large fraction of the wealth of people at the top is connected to the capital. So the capital share going up is deeply connected with all the inequalities. This is for U.S. executives. The blue bar at the bottom is salary. Salary's gone up a bit, but that's peanuts. So you talk about, I get $1 million salary, that's peanuts. What the top people in the country know is the way to get really wealthy is by taking capital income, not by getting salaries. That's the issue. Okay. So I said there are two hypotheses to explain this, that it's efficient production and the masters deserve what they get, because if we don't do what we're told, the ship will sink. They are responsible for everything. And the other hypothesis, which I'm more favorable to, I'll say, is that there's an elite group that is pulling off economic rents from productivity of the group. They're getting extra value. In economics, we think of, if there's increasing returns to some activity, there is no clear who should get the increasing returns, because they're the result from the collaboration. And without the collaboration, you don't have the returns. And the question is, who gets that? How do we divide that up? I want to now, the last kind of section is about what's the right inequality that we need for this production in a world of teamwork. So almost any economic or any sensible analysis says there's a U-shape or an inverse U-shape. There can be too little inequality, and right-wing guys say, hey, too little inequality, and clearly they can be right in some circumstances. And then there can be too much inequality. So with the star there, is meant to be, that's the optimum, not the fair point, that's the optimum for production point. That's, if you want to maximize your GDP, there's some point you give incentives, but you can be too far down. And I just put with a question mark, the US may be too far down in the inequality things. And for Sweden, I first put this star and said maybe you're too low, but then you've increased your inequality. So then I put Sweden, maybe the current level is correct. It's very hard to know. I mean, that's and if you're a billionaire, you know that a little more inequality will be better. And if you're a normal person, you believe a little less inequality, or maybe a lot less. But the point is, there is this curve that operates. I will now stop. That's fine.
We see the tendency all over, Sweden, United States, any country as I know of, inequality is growing. What if it's so? Well, I don't know, but scientifically,
so. Yes, so.
What does that mean? Because we are used to, historically, in the industrial society, almost all over, to have increasing equality. It went from the feudal society to whatever, and we went to a society where inequality actually
Right.
decreased. What would the difference mean to the future of work? Because I really try to keep the title of this seminar. That's. Do you have any?
Well, this is about this is about the rewards to work, the inequality. For the future of actual work, I think there you might think about what's going to replace professors like me, and it's going to be these massive online open courses, MOOCs they're called. I don't know if you'll ever be replaceable in a similar way, but certainly there'll be robots in the future.
Moderator robots?
What was that?
Moderator robots?
Well, it's a key. I think it's the inequality comes in. It's the who owns the robots, and who owns the MOOCs. You have I'm lecturing here something that you own it, or the Swedish educational TV owns it. If you could sell it at a high price, you would be wealthy, and I wouldn't be. And so I think this big issue of owning capital and owning parts of new technologies that are clearly created by all different parts of society, letting that ownership go to very few people is just a way of keeping inequality high or growing. So the future of work has to be with more. We're going to have more machines, more technology, more ways of delivering goods and services, and we have to be able to own our part of that production.
May I? Sorry for this, but I just and then I just leave it. Work used to be paid work, used to be the key, the entrance key to social advancement, higher pay, increased security, social status in society. It was a way of advancing into, as we say, we now have a term in Sweden, utanförskap, meaning you are outside society because you don't get into the labor market. But even today, if you get into the labor market, you're not guaranteed that this is a key for you to be part of society. You can get out quite quickly. Now, this role of work that it used to have, and perhaps still have, but to a lesser degree, what does that mean? That fewer people, that work will serve fewer people as that guarantee or that vehicle for being a full member of society. Let's put it that way.
Okay, so I'll phrase it this way. A robot has just replaced you and does your work more efficiently than you do. The Watson machine, we know, is fully capable of pulling out all kinds of things. They can beat the best chess players in the world. And so we have a problem. I think in that kind of situation, we have to make sure that the average person and the person without work, this reminds me what you spoke about, the women doing their work but not in the labor market, but they have to be paid in some fashion. And so there it's a question of having a social wage, whatever you want to call it. We sometimes call it a citizen's share. Citizen in a country is pretty much guaranteed, regardless of whether they work or not, protection by the police of themselves. If they're a child, you're going to go to school. If you get sick, you'll be taken to the hospital or a doctor. And if more and more people are in the wonderful state of having a robot do their work, then they have got to just get some of the rewards from that. Otherwise, you'll be in the feared state of the Americans, of James Madison, who just said, there'll just be riots in your streets. And we know that the Chinese government is very concerned about their level of inequality. Their Gini coefficient, the measure, is about the same as the Americans. We talk about it, but we're not really that scared, because I think democracies we can actually have more inequality than non-democracies, because we can say to everybody, oh, you could vote us out of office. You vote for this party, fine. That and we can say you're free to have all the choices you want. You don't make it too bad. In a more dictatorial regime, you can't quite do that because the people you know who are controlling things are indeed an unchosen government.
Are you saying that work in the role it used to have cannot play that function because of robots, because of this and that? Is that what we have to?
Yeah, yes. As people are going to be, as people get replaced, or as we have better machines and things that makes it possible for more and more productivity, more and more output, we can reduce hours of work, or we can have people, you say, not working, and they have to be taken care of, and they are part of the society. You think of it more as, gee, people work for a while, and they do some good things, then maybe they leave work for a while, and maybe bring up their family or whatever it is, and so you need systems to deal with that world. And remember, the technology and the science, which is what I started with in the beginning, the science, that's all being created by social investments. It's our taxpayer dollars that funds the science that ultimately produces better technology that is meant to reduce the work burden on everybody. And if it turns out that as we reduce the work burden on everybody, some people, just don't make very much out of work, we have to give them a social income as part of the process.
So thank you very much. Thank to all of you for coming. As I said, this is a first in a series of similar seminars. So I keep your eyes open for the next one, which should be in December, I believe, and that will be about the future of intellectuals with Professor Mark Lilla from Columbia University in New York. Thank you very much.